I'm Natalie Thompson, 28 years old, and today I'm about to offer my parents jobs at the company they said would never succeed. My hands shake as I dial their number, remembering my father's exact words from 10 years ago. Net, you're chasing fantasies. Real people get real jobs. The $3.2 million business I built in secret is about to shatter everything they believed about their unrealistic daughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mahogany desk in my Nashville office feels surreal as I stare at the employment contracts I had my lawyer draft this morning. Two identical offers, each for $85,000 a year plus benefits, more than my parents have ever made in their lives. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown Nashville buzzes with the energy that first drew me here 5 years ago, broke and desperate to prove them wrong. My company, Streamline Digital, occupies 3 floors of this gleaming building now. 42 employees, partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, and revenue that would make my father's factory supervisor salary look like pocket change. Yet none of them know about any of it. The irony isn't lost on me. The same parents who lectured me about getting my head out of the clouds are now facing layoffs at their respective jobs. Dad's manufacturing plant is downsizing after 30 years of his loyal service. Mom's administrative position at the local clinic is being eliminated due to budget cuts. They're both 55, with limited savings and dwindling prospects in Milwaukee's shrinking job market. 3 weeks ago, my brother Marcus called with the news. Nat, they're trying to stay positive, but they're scared. Dad's been looking for work for 2 months with nothing. Mom's putting on a brave face, but she cried when she told me about the severance package. His voice carried the weight of watching our parents, people who had always seemed invincible in their certainty about how the world worked, suddenly vulnerable and uncertain. That phone call triggered something I'd been avoiding for years. The success I'd built, the vindication I'd earned, meant nothing if I couldn't use it to help the people who raised me, even if they'd never believed in my path. But offering them jobs would require revealing everything. The business they'd dismissed, the lifestyle they'd assumed was unsustainable, the daughter they'd underestimated. I pick up the framed photo on my desk from last Christmas. There we are, the 4 of us, crowded into their small living room. Mom's wearing the sweater I sent her, though she'd mentioned it was a bit expensive for everyday wear. Dad's arm is around my shoulder, but his expression holds that familiar mixture of love and gentle disappointment, as if he's still waiting for me to outgrow this computer phase and settle into something sensible. They think I'm barely scraping by in Nashville, working freelance web design jobs and living paycheck to paycheck. During our monthly calls, I carefully edit my reality. When Mom asks about my apartment, I mention the neighborhood, but not that I own the entire building. When Dad inquires about work, I discuss projects without revealing that those projects include redesigning systems for companies they'd recognize from commercials. The deception started as self-protection. After years of having every ambitious thought dismissed as impractical dreaming, I learned to keep my victories private. But what began as emotional shield became something more complicated, a parallel life where I could succeed without their skepticism, where I could build something extraordinary without their practical limitations. My phone buzzes with a text from Hannah Washington, my college roommate and now COO. Board meeting moved to 3 p.m. Also, did you decide about the Austin expansion? Hannah is the only person who knows the full story of my family dynamics. She was there during those late nights in our dorm room when I'd hang up from another discouraging call home, another conversation where my parents suggested I consider backup plans for my online business hobby. The Austin expansion represents our next major growth phase, a regional office that would double our workforce and put us on track for a potential 8-figure year. It's the kind of decision that would have seemed like pure fantasy to the 19-year-old girl whose parents insisted she was too unrealistic about technology careers. I remember the exact moment their disappointment crystallized into something harder to overcome. It was my sophomore year at Milwaukee Community College. the compromise school after they'd refused to help with the student loans needed for a 4-year university. I'd been running a small web design business from my dorm room, making more money than most of my friends with part-time retail jobs. "Look at this," I'd said excitedly, showing them my laptop screen during a weekend visit home. "I made $800 this week helping local businesses build websites. Mrs. Peterson's bakery is getting twice as many orders since I redesigned their online presence." Dad barely glanced at the screen before returning to his newspaper. "That's nice, Nat, but you can't build a life on playing around with computers. What happens when everyone figures out how to make their own websites?" "But Dad, this isn't just websites anymore. I'm helping them with digital marketing, social media strategy, online payment systems." "Honey," Mom had interrupted gently, using the tone she reserved for breaking disappointing news. "Your father and I have been talking. We think you should consider transferring to the state university for their education program. Teaching is stable, has good benefits, and you're so good with people." That conversation ended with me storming out, their voices following me to the driveway. "She'll understand when she's older. The internet thing is just a phase. We're trying to protect her from disappointment." Their protection felt like imprisonment. Every conversation became a settled negotiation where I had to justify my choices against their conviction that I was destined for failure. They loved me. I never doubted that. But they loved a version of me that didn't exist. A sensible daughter who would eventually abandon her unrealistic dreams for something they could understand and support. Now, 5 years later, I'm sitting in an office that could house their entire apartment, preparing to offer them salaries that would transform their lives. The roles have reversed in ways they can't yet imagine. I'm no longer the dreamy daughter who needs their guidance towards practical choices. I'm the CEO who could provide them with the security they've always preached about. The employment contracts feel heavy in my hands, weighted with more than just legal language. They represent a choice between continued deception and a truth that will shatter their assumptions about who I am and what I've become. Part of me wants to maintain the fiction, to find some other way to help them without revealing how wrong they were about everything. But another part, the part that still carries the sting of their dismissal, knows this conversation is inevitable. They're about to learn that their impractical daughter built something extraordinary while they were waiting for her to get realistic. The question is whether our relationship can survive the revelation that everything they believed about my future was wrong. I take a deep breath and reach for my phone. It's time to make the call that will change everything. Growing up in Milwaukee's South Side meant understanding the value of steady work and practical choices. Our neighborhood was filled with families like ours, working-class people who punched time clocks, earned their paychecks through sweat and consistency, and viewed anything outside traditional employment with deep suspicion. My father, James, had worked at the same automotive parts factory for 28 years, starting on the assembly line and eventually becoming a shift supervisor. My mother, Patricia, handled administrative duties at Riverside Family Clinic, a job she'd held for 15 years after my younger brother Marcus started school. Their world operated on clear, unshakable principles. Get a good education, find a stable job with benefits, work hard for 30 years, and retire with a pension. Anything that deviated from this formula was viewed as risky at best, delusional at worst. They'd both grown up during economic downturns that taught them the value of security over ambition, steady paychecks over entrepreneurial dreams. Our house on Maple Street reflected their practical mindset. A modest 2-bedroom ranch with aluminum siding and a small backyard where Dad grew tomatoes every summer. The living room furniture had been purchased in 1998 and maintained carefully ever since. Mom clipped coupons religiously, and Dad performed all repairs himself rather than hiring professionals. They weren't poor, but every dollar had a purpose, and frivolous spending was a foreign concept. Marcus, 3 years younger than me, seemed to understand their expectations instinctively. Even as a child, he gravitated toward activities they could comprehend and support. Little League Baseball, Boy Scouts, good grades in traditional subjects like math and science. He never questioned their advice or pushed against their boundaries,
content to follow the path they'd mapped out for responsible young men. I was different from the beginning, though it took years for any of us to fully understand how different. While Marcus played with toys that had clear purposes, trucks, building blocks, sports equipment, I was drawn to anything that let me create or organize. I turned our basement into various business ventures. A library where I charge neighborhood kids a nickel to borrow books, a pet sitting service for families going on vacation, and eventually a primitive computer lab where I taught myself basic programming on Dad's ancient desktop. The first real clash came when I was 14. I'd been running a small tutoring business for younger kids in our neighborhood, charging $5 per hour to help with homework and test preparation. Word spread quickly, and within 2 months, I had 12 regular clients and was making more money than my friends with traditional part-time jobs at the local grocery store. One evening at dinner, I excitedly shared my success. "Mom, Dad, guess what? Mrs. Rodriguez wants to hire me to tutor both her kids 3 times a week. And the Johnsons asked if I could help their daughter with her college application essays. I'm thinking about raising my rates to $8 an hour since everyone keeps recommending me to their friends." Dad set down his fork and looked at me with that expression I'd come to know well. Patient but firm, like a teacher correcting a student who'd missed the point of the lesson. "That's nice that you're helping your classmates, Nat, but you can't treat tutoring like a real job. You need to focus on your own grades and think about college applications." "But I am thinking about college. I'm saving money for it. And my grades are fine. I'm getting A's in everything except chemistry, and that's because Mr. Peterson teaches from textbooks that are older than I am." Mom joined the conversation with her characteristic gentleness. "Sweetheart, we appreciate that you want to help your friends, but you shouldn't be charging them money. That feels a bit commercial. Maybe you could just study together instead." The word commercial stung in a way I couldn't fully articulate at 14. They had made it sound dirty, as if there was something wrong with being paid for providing value. I tried to explain that my tutoring sessions were structured, that I prepared materials and tracked each student's progress, and parents were seeing real improvements in their children's grades. But their expressions told me they'd already categorized this as another phase I'd outgrow. "You're good with people, Nat," Dad continued, his tone taking on the encouraging quality adults use to redirect children toward more appropriate activities.
The conversation that followed became a template for countless future discussions. They acknowledged my enthusiasm while systematically dismantling the legitimacy of what I was building. My tutoring business became helping friends with homework. My interest in technology became playing around with computers. My talk of starting a website design company became daydreaming about unrealistic careers. Marcus watched these exchanges from the sidelines, learning valuable lessons about which paths earned approval and which ones led to concerned lectures about the importance of realistic expectations. He internalized their messages and steered himself toward conventional success: good grades, traditional extracurriculars, acceptance into the state university's accounting program. His predictable choices earned constant praise, while my entrepreneurial experiments earned patient tolerance at best. The pattern intensified throughout high school. I'd discover a new opportunity or develop a small business idea, share my excitement with them, and watch their expressions shift from polite interest to gentle concern. They never forbade me from pursuing these projects, but they made it clear that such activities were diversions from the serious business of preparing for a conventional career. During my junior year, I launched what I considered my first real business. I'd taught myself basic web design and started creating simple websites for local small businesses who couldn't afford professional services. My first client was Mr. Chen, who owned a small restaurant downtown. I charged him $300 to build a website that included his menu, contact information, and an online reservation system I'd figured out how to integrate. When the site went live and Mr. Chen started getting online orders for the first time in his restaurant's 15-year history, I was ecstatic. I'd helped a real business solve a real problem and earned money doing something I genuinely enjoyed. I rushed home to share the news,
certain this would finally prove to my parents that my interests had legitimate commercial value.
That's wonderful that you helped Mr. Chen, Mom said after I finished explaining the project. It's so nice that you want to use your computer skills to volunteer in the community. But I didn't volunteer, I clarified. He paid me $300. And now Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop wants me to build one for her business, too. The pause that followed felt loaded with unspoken communication between my parents. Dad cleared his throat. Nat, we need to talk about this. You can't just start charging people money without understanding the legal implications. What about taxes, business licenses, insurance? You could get yourself and these business owners into trouble. What should have been a celebration of my first significant entrepreneurial success turned into a lecture about the complexities of running a business and the importance of leaving such things to the professionals. They weren't trying to crush my spirit. I understood that even then, but their practical concerns had the effect of making my achievements feel naive and potentially dangerous. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would shape the next decade of my relationship with my parents. If they couldn't see the value in what I was building, I would build it without their knowledge or approval. I would prove myself first, then share the results when success was undeniable. I had no idea that decision would eventually lead to a multi-million-dollar business they knew nothing about, or that their own financial security would one day depend on the unrealistic dreams they'd spent years trying to redirect toward more sensible pursuits.
Senior year of high school was supposed to be about college planning and career preparation. For most of my classmates, that meant SAT prep courses, campus visits, and guidance counselor meetings about major selection. For me, it meant a series of increasingly frustrating conversations with adults who seemed determined to save me from myself. The breaking point came during a mandatory meeting with Mr. Gregory Foster, Lincoln High School's head guidance counselor. Mr. Foster had been directing students toward practical career paths for over 20 years, and his office walls were covered with thank you letters from former students who'd followed his advice into stable jobs with good benefits. He took obvious pride in his success rate at steering teenagers away from what he called pipe dream careers toward more realistic options. I entered his office that October afternoon with a folder containing my unofficial transcript, a business plan I'd written for a digital marketing company, and documentation of the websites I'd built for local businesses over the past year. I'd been running my web design operation quietly, building a portfolio and saving money while maintaining honor roll grades. I thought I was prepared to make my case for pursuing business or computer science in college. So, Natalie, Mr. Foster began, consulting the file on his desk, your grades are solid. 3.7 GPA, good test scores, no disciplinary issues. You're exactly the kind of student who should be able to get into a decent state school. Now, what are you thinking about for a major? I took a deep breath and launched into my presentation. I explained my web design business, showed him screenshots of the sites I'd created, and detailed my plan to study digital marketing and computer science. I talked about the growing demand for online presence among small businesses and my vision of helping them compete in an increasingly digital marketplace. Mr. Foster listened politely, occasionally nodding, but his expression grew more concerned as I continued. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and gave me the kind of patient smile adults reserve for children who've announced their intention to become astronauts or movie stars. Natalie, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and it's clear you've put some thought into this. But I have to ask, have you considered more traditional career paths? Your grades suggest you do well in education or healthcare. Teaching is a stable profession with excellent benefits, and there's always demand for good teachers. But Mr. Foster, I've already proven I can succeed in digital marketing. I've made over $4,000 this year helping local businesses improve their online presence. Mrs. Patterson's flower shop saw a 30% increase in sales after I redesigned her website and set up her social media accounts. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making notes. That's nice volunteer work, and it shows you're community-minded. But Natalie, you have to understand that what you're calling a business is really just a hobby. The computer industry is extremely competitive, and it changes so rapidly that today's skills become obsolete within a few years. You'd be setting yourself up for constant stress and uncertainty. The word hobby hit like a physical blow. I'd spent months learning coding languages, studying search engine optimization, and developing systems for tracking client results. I'd created invoices, managed project timelines, and handled customer service issues. Yet to Mr. Foster, all of that effort and success amounted to a hobby. But what about all the growth in technology careers? I pressed. Everything I've read suggests that digital marketing and web development are expanding fields with huge opportunities. Mr. Foster's expression shifted from patient to mildly condescending. Natalie, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen countless students get caught up in whatever the latest trendy career seems to be. In the 80s, everyone wanted to be in computers. In the 90s, it was environmental science. Now it's this internet thing. The students who succeed are the ones who choose fields that have been stable for decades. He opened a drawer and pulled out several college brochures. Look, you're a bright girl with good people skills. Have you considered nursing? It's a growing field with excellent job security. Or what about business administration with a focus on human resources? Those are careers where you'd use your interpersonal strengths in a stable environment. I stared at the brochures he'd spread across his desk, all promoting programs that would lead to traditional employment in established industries. Not one of them related to technology or entrepreneurship. It was as if my demonstrated success in digital marketing had never happened, as if the evidence I brought to support my career goals was invisible to him.
Mr. Foster, I'm not interested in nursing or human resources. I want to build a digital marketing company. I already have paying clients and a clear business model. I just need to develop my technical skills and business knowledge. He sighed and made another note on his legal pad. Natalie, I'm going to be direct with you because I care about your future. This internet marketing thing might seem exciting now, but it's not a real career path. It's unpredictable, unstable, and frankly, most small businesses that try to hire teenagers for their web presence are just being taken advantage of. The suggestion that I was somehow deceiving my clients made my face burn with embarrassment and anger. Mr. Chen's restaurant had seen its best month in 5 years after I'd set up his online ordering system. Mrs. Patterson had hired a part-time employee specifically to handle the increased business from her improved web presence. These weren't elaborate cons, they were measurable business improvements. I have documentation of increased sales and customer engagement for every client I've worked with, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't about taking advantage of anyone. I'm providing real value. Mr. Foster leaned forward, his expression becoming almost parental. Listen, I've seen dozens of students with your same confidence about unconventional careers. Some were going to be professional musicians. Others were convinced they'd make it as artists or writers. You know what happened to most of them? They ended up scrambling for any job they could find in their late 20s, wishing they'd prepared for something more realistic. He pulled my folder closer and began writing notes. Here's what I'm going to recommend. Apply to the state university for their business administration program. That will give you a solid foundation in traditional business principles. Take some computer classes as electives if you want, but focus on skills that will make you employable in established companies. After graduation, you can always do web design as a side project while building a real career in corporate management or sales. The meeting ended with Mr. Foster handing me a stack of application materials for programs I had no interest in pursuing and a recommendation letter that described me as a well-rounded student with strong interpersonal skills who would benefit from guidance toward realistic career objectives. That afternoon, I sat in my car in the school parking lot staring at the brochures and feeling completely deflated.
Every adult in my life seemed convinced that my interests and demonstrated abilities were irrelevant to my future success. They acknowledged my skills, but refused to recognize them as building blocks for a legitimate career. When I got home, my parents asked about the meeting with obvious expectations. They've been looking forward to Mr. Foster's professional guidance in steering me toward a sensible college major. He thinks I should study business administration or maybe consider nursing, I said, dropping the brochures on the kitchen table. Dad picked up one of the pamphlets and nodded approvingly. Business administration is a solid choice. You'd learn real business skills that would be valuable anywhere, much better than this computer stuff you've been playing around with. Mom examined the nursing brochure with interest. This looks like a wonderful program, Nat. Nurses are always in demand, and the starting salaries are really good. Plus, you'd be helping people. I wanted to scream that I was already helping people, already running a successful business, already earning money doing something I loved. But I could see in their faces the same patient certainty that had characterized Mr. Foster's advice. They'd already decided what was realistic for me, and no amount of evidence would change their minds. That night, I made a decision that would define my relationship with my family for the next decade. If the adults in my life couldn't see the value in what I was building, I would build it without asking for their approval or validation. I would prove them wrong through results, not arguments. I had no idea how completely I would succeed or how difficult it would be to bridge the gap between their perceptions and my reality when the time finally came to reveal the truth.
The compromise we reached about college satisfied no one, but kept peace in the house. I would attend Milwaukee Community College for 2 years, live at home to save money, and then transfer to the state university for a business degree. My parents saw this as a mature, financially responsible approach to higher education. I saw it as buying myself time to build my business while maintaining the appearance of following their prescribed path. Milwaukee Community College occupied a series of unremarkable brick buildings on the city's west side, filled with students who'd chosen the practical route over the prestigious one. Some were there by financial necessity, others by academic limitation, but most shared a certain resignation about their educational trajectory. I was probably the only student who viewed community college as a strategic launching pad rather than a consolation prize. My first stroke of luck came during orientation week, when I met Hannah Washington in our required computer literacy course. Hannah was a year older, studying communications with plans to transfer to a 4-year program for journalism. She had natural charisma, an infectious laugh, and an instinctive understanding of social media that complemented my technical skills perfectly. "You know, you could probably make real money with those web design skills," she said one afternoon as we worked on a group project in the computer lab. I'd been helping classmates with basic HTML assignments, and Hannah had noticed the quality difference between my work and everyone else's. "I already do," I admitted, then immediately regretted the confession. I'd been so careful to keep my business activities separate from school and family. Hannah's eyes lit up with interest rather than skepticism. "Really? Like actual paying clients?" Something about her genuine enthusiasm made me open up. I told her about my portfolio of local businesses, the steady income I'd been generating, and my plans to expand beyond basic web design into comprehensive digital marketing services. Instead of the concerned expressions I'd grown accustomed to from adults, Hannah responded with excitement and questions about specific strategies. "This is brilliant," she said, pulling out her notebook to jot down ideas. "Do you realize how many small businesses have terrible social media presence? I bet you could double your revenue just by adding social media management to your services." That conversation marked the beginning of a partnership that would transform both our futures. Hannah had an intuitive grasp of content creation and audience engagement that I lacked, while I provided the technical foundation and business structure she needed to turn her creative ideas into profitable services. We started small, with Hannah managing social media accounts for my existing web design clients. Her content increased their online engagement dramatically, which led to measurable improvements in their sales and customer retention.
Word spread quickly among Milwaukee's small business community about the two college students who could significantly improve a company's online presence for a fraction of what established marketing firms charged. By the end of our first semester working together, we were managing digital marketing for 12 local businesses and generating more monthly revenue than most of our classmates made from their part-time retail jobs. But the real breakthrough came when Hannah suggested we expand beyond our immediate geographic area. "Why limit ourselves to Milwaukee?" she asked one evening as we worked in the college library, surrounded by laptops and client files. "The internet doesn't care where we're located. We could have clients anywhere." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Working with local businesses felt manageable. I could meet clients face to face, understand their communities, and provide personalized service. Expanding to remote clients would require different systems, more professional processes, and a level of business sophistication I wasn't sure we possessed. Hannah pushed me past my comfort zone. "Look, we've already figured out how to deliver results for local businesses. The same strategies will work for companies in other cities. We just need to get better at remote communication and project management." Our first remote client came through a referral from Mr. Chen, whose restaurant success story had impressed his supplier in Chicago. A small specialty food distributor wanted to establish an online presence to reach retailers beyond their traditional sales territory. The project was larger and more complex than anything we'd handled locally, requiring an e-commerce system, inventory management integration, and automated marketing sequences. Hannah and I spent 3 weeks researching, learning new platforms, and developing systems we'd never attempted before. The learning curve was steep, but we completed the project successfully, and the client saw a 40% increase in B2B sales within 2 months of launching their new digital strategy.
That success opened doors we hadn't expected. The food distributor referred us to other companies in their network, and suddenly we were managing digital marketing campaigns for businesses across the Midwest. Our monthly revenue jumped from the low thousands to consistently over $10,000. The financial success created new challenges in maintaining secrecy from my parents. I opened a business checking account, filed for a basic LLC, and started tracking expenses more carefully. When tax season arrived, I hired an accountant without mentioning it at home. My parents assumed the occasional checks I deposited were from random web design jobs, small amounts that supplemented my financial aid. The deception became more elaborate as our business grew. I told my parents I was working part-time at the college's computer lab, which explained my irregular schedule and frequent late nights on campus. When they occasionally asked about my finances, I mentioned receiving small scholarships and financial aid refunds that covered my expenses. Meanwhile, Hannah and I were developing increasingly sophisticated marketing strategies and building a reputation in the digital marketing community. We attended online conferences, participated in industry forums, and connected with other entrepreneurs who shared our passion for helping small businesses succeed online. The contrast between my public life and private success became increasingly surreal. At family dinners, my parents would express concern about my future career prospects, while I mentally calculated monthly recurring revenue from clients they'd never heard of. When relatives asked about my plans after community college, I'd give vague answers about business school, while privately knowing I was already running a more successful business than most of them had ever imagined. Marcus, now in his senior year of high school, had begun following the path my parents had always wanted for both of us. He'd chosen accounting as his intended major, spent his weekends working at a local grocery store, and talked about the security of working for an established company after graduation. My parents praised his practical approach constantly, using him as an example of realistic career planning. "Look at Marcus," Dad would say during our monthly check-ins about my academic progress. "He knows exactly what he wants to do, and he's taking the right steps to get there. Accounting is steady work with good prospects." I would nod and agree, internally calculating that my monthly business revenue already exceeded what Marcus might earn in his first year after graduation. But proving that point would require revelations I wasn't ready to make. The most challenging aspect of maintaining the deception wasn't the logistics. It was the isolation. Hannah was the only person in my life who understood the significance of what we were building.
She celebrated our victories, helped solve our challenges, and shared the excitement of each new milestone. But I couldn't share any of it with my family without triggering the same concerned conversations about realistic expectations that had shaped every discussion of my future since childhood. By the end of our second year at community college, Hannah and I were managing digital marketing for 37 clients across 8 states. Our business had evolved from basic web design to comprehensive digital strategy, including content creation, social media management, search engine optimization, and e-commerce development. We were earning more than most college graduates and had developed systems that allowed us to scale efficiently. The success felt hollow without anyone to share it with besides Hannah. I wanted to tell my parents about the businesses we were helping, the problems we were solving, and the financial independence I'd already achieved. But their consistent dismissal of entrepreneurial ambitions had created a wall between us that seemed impossible to breach. As transfer season approached and I prepared applications to 4-year universities, I realized I was facing a choice that would define the next phase of my life. I could continue the charade, maintaining the fiction that I was just another business student preparing for conventional employment, or I could finally reveal the truth about what Hannah and I had built and deal with whatever consequences followed. The decision became more urgent when Hannah announced she'd been accepted to transfer to the University of Tennessee's communications program. She said, "Nashville has an incredible entrepreneurship scene. We could move our business there and tap into a much larger network of potential clients and collaborators." For the first time, I seriously considered leaving Milwaukee entirely, not just for college, but to build our business in a city where entrepreneurship was celebrated rather than viewed with suspicion. It would mean leaving behind the family whose approval I'd been seeking for 20 years, but it might also mean the freedom to succeed without constantly hiding my achievements. The choice was becoming clear. Continue living a double life in Milwaukee, or take the leap toward building something extraordinary in a place where ambitious dreams were encouraged rather than redirected toward more realistic options.
The conversation with my parents about transferring to Nashville instead of the local state university went exactly as I had expected. We sat around the kitchen table on a cold February evening. My acceptance letter to University of Tennessee spread between us like evidence in a trial. Nashville? Dad's voice carried the tone he reserved for particularly impractical suggestions. Nat, why would you want to go to school so far from home when you can get the same business degree right here? Out-of-state tuition is 3 times more expensive, and you'd have living expenses on top of that. I had prepared for this argument with a combination of truth and strategic omission. The University of Tennessee has a really strong entrepreneurship program, and Nashville has an incredible business community. I think the networking opportunities would be worth the extra cost. Mom looked concerned. But honey, you don't know anyone there. What if something happens? What if you can't find work to help pay for school? The irony was almost unbearable. I was sitting across from parents who worried about my ability to find part-time work in Nashville, while I was already running a business that could support me comfortably in any city. But revealing that information would require explanations I wasn't prepared to give. "I've been saving money from my web design work," I said carefully, "and Hannah got accepted too. We could be roommates, which would help with expenses." Dad shook his head. "This sounds like another one of your impractical ideas. You and Hannah have been feeding each other's unrealistic expectations for 2 years now. Maybe some distance would help you both focus on your studies instead of these computer projects." The dismissal of Hannah, who had become not just my business partner, but my closest friend, and the only person who truly understood my ambitions, stung particularly deeply. They saw our partnership as mutual delusion, rather than the successful collaboration it had become. "Look," I said, trying one more approach, "I'll pay for the difference in tuition myself. I've been more successful with the web design than you realize, and I think Nashville could really help me develop those skills into something sustainable." The look my parents exchanged contained volumes of unspoken communication. They'd clearly discussed my computer phase privately and reached conclusions about where it was heading. "Natalie," Mom said gently,
We're proud that you want to be independent, but we're worried you're making decisions based on a hobby that might not translate into real career prospects. Wouldn't it be smarter to get your degree here, establish yourself locally, and then think about relocating if you still want to after graduation? The word hobby had lost none of its power to infuriate me over the years. But this time, instead of arguing, I made a decision that would change everything. I would move to Nashville with or without their approval, using the business income they didn't know existed to fund my education and prove them wrong through results rather than arguments. I understand your concerns, I said quietly, but I'm going to do this. I'll figure out the finances, and I'll prove that it was the right decision. 3 months later, Hannah and I loaded our belongings into a rented U-Haul and drove south toward Nashville. My parents came to see me off, their expressions mixing love with resignation, as if they were watching me make a mistake they were powerless to prevent. "Call us every week," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "And remember, if this doesn't work out, there's no shame in coming home and finishing school here." Dad pressed a check into my hand, $500 from their savings account, money they couldn't really afford to give. "Just in case," he said gruffly, "for emergencies." The gesture broke my heart, even as it reinforced my determination to succeed. They were sacrificing to support a decision they fundamentally disagreed with, demonstrating the kind of love that transcends understanding. I wanted desperately to tell them that their $500 represented less than I earned in a typical week, but that revelation would require admitting I'd been deceiving them for years. Nashville in August was a revelation. The city hummed with an entrepreneurial energy I'd never experienced in Milwaukee. Coffee shops were filled with people working on laptops, discussing startup ideas, and planning business ventures. The university campus buzzed with students who talked openly about launching companies and building careers around their passions, rather than settling for whatever jobs were available. Our client base expanded rapidly in this environment. Nashville's vibrant small business scene included hundreds of companies that needed exactly the services we provided. And the city's entrepreneurship-friendly culture meant business owners were more willing to take chances on young, innovative service providers. Within 6 months of moving to Nashville, we were managing digital marketing for over 60 clients and had hired our first employee, a part-time content creator who helped us keep up with the increasing demand for social media management. Our monthly revenue had grown to over $20,000, and we were reinvesting profits into better technology and expanded service offerings. The financial success created new challenges in maintaining the fiction with my family. During our weekly phone calls, I had to carefully edit my reality to match their expectations of a struggling college student working part-time jobs to make ends meet. "How are you managing the expenses?" Mom would ask, with genuine concern. "Are you eating enough? Do you need us to send anything?" I developed a complex narrative about scholarships, financial aid, and various part-time jobs that explained my ability to pay tuition and living expenses without revealing the true source of my income. The lies became more elaborate as our business success grew, requiring careful attention to maintain consistency across multiple conversations. The deception was emotionally exhausting, but it seemed necessary to protect both my relationship with my parents and my own psychological well-being. Their constant worry about my financial stability would only intensify if they knew the truth about my unconventional income source. Meanwhile, Marcus was following his prescribed path exactly as planned. He graduated high school with good grades, enrolled in the state university's accounting program, and took a part-time job at a local tax preparation service. My parents' relief and pride in his conventional choices was evident in every family update they shared during our calls. "Marcus got promoted to shift supervisor at his job," Mom reported during one of our Sunday conversations. "His boss says he's never seen someone pick up the tax code so quickly. He's really setting himself up well for after graduation." The implicit comparison was always present. Marcus was making responsible choices that led to predictable outcomes, while I was pursuing uncertain ventures in an unfamiliar city. They loved me and wanted me to succeed, but they couldn't shake their conviction that I was making my life unnecessarily difficult. The most challenging moment came during my first Christmas break home. I'd flown back to Milwaukee for 2 weeks, carefully timing the trip to coincide with a natural lull in our business activity. But maintaining the fiction of being a struggling student while surrounded by the evidence of my childhood felt almost impossible. Sitting in my old bedroom, surrounded by high school memorabilia and family photos, I felt the weight of the double life I'd constructed. Downstairs, my parents worried about my finances and career prospects while I calculated business expenses on my laptop and managed client accounts from my childhood desk. The contrast became most apparent when Dad asked about my plans for after graduation. Have you thought about internships? Maybe something in Milwaukee so you could move back home and save money while you look for a real job. I wanted to tell him that I was already running a real business, already earning more than most of his factory colleagues, already building something that could provide financial security for our entire family. But years of dismissal had created a wall of mistrust that seemed impossible to breach without destroying the relationship entirely. Instead, I gave vague answers about exploring opportunities and keeping my options open. The conversation ended with them offering to help me research practical career paths and promising to ask around about entry-level positions at local companies. Flying back to Nashville after that visit, I realized that the gap between my reality and their perceptions had grown too wide to bridge gradually. The success Hannah and I were building would eventually become impossible to hide, and when that moment came, the revelation would be explosive. I had no idea that the explosion would come sooner than expected, triggered by circumstances that would force me to choose between maintaining the deception and using my success to help the people I loved most.
The turning point came during my junior year when Hannah and I realized we had outgrown our informal business structure. We were managing over 80 clients, had hired 4 part-time employees, and were generating monthly revenue that exceeded what most small businesses earned in a year. What had started as a college side project had evolved into a legitimate company that needed proper systems, legal structure, and professional operations. "We need to make this official," Hannah said one evening as we worked late in our apartment, laptops covering every surface of the dining table. "We're basically running a marketing agency out of our living room, and it's getting ridiculous." She was right. Our client roster included a Nashville recording studio, a Chicago-based food distributor, 3 different e-commerce companies, and a growing list of professional service firms across the Southeast. We were handling 6-figure marketing budgets and delivering results that competitive agencies with decades of experience couldn't match. The challenge was taking that next step without revealing the full scope of our success to my family. Incorporating a business, signing commercial leases, and hiring full-time employees would create a paper trail that would be difficult to explain as a college side project. I made the decision to fully commit to building something extraordinary, even if it meant the deception with my parents would eventually become impossible to maintain. We incorporated as Streamline Digital, secured a small office space in Nashville's growing tech district, and began the process of scaling our operations professionally. Our first major breakthrough came when Alex Rivera, a successful entrepreneur who'd built and sold 2 marketing companies, reached out after hearing about our work through the Nashville business community. He'd been watching our client success stories and was interested in potentially investing in our growth. "I've been watching what you 2 have built," Alex said during our first meeting in his downtown Nashville office. "You're solving real problems for small businesses, and your results speak for themselves. But you're thinking too small. With the right structure and capital, you could dominate the regional market." Alex became our mentor and eventually our strategic partner, bringing decades of business experience and industry connections that accelerated our growth exponentially. He helped us develop systems for client acquisition, employee management, and service delivery that transformed Streamline Digital from a promising startup into a professionally operated marketing agency. Within 6 months of partnering with Alex, we had moved to a larger office, hired 12 full-time employees, and established ourselves as one of Nashville's premier digital marketing firms. Our client roster grew to include major regional businesses, and our monthly revenue consistently exceeded 6 figures. The success was intoxicating, but also isolating. I was building something extraordinary while pretending to be a typical college student struggling with tuition payments and part-time jobs. During family phone calls, I had to remember to sound appropriately stressed about finances and uncertain about career prospects.
"How are your grades this semester?" Mom would ask during our Sunday conversations, genuine concern in her voice. "Are you working too many hours? We could send a little money if things are tight." Meanwhile, I was sitting in my private office overlooking downtown Nashville, reviewing monthly profit reports that showed we were on track for our first seven-figure year. The cognitive dissonance was becoming emotionally unsustainable. The breakthrough that would eventually force the revelation came when Diana Park, a venture capitalist from Austin, contacted us about a potential partnership. She represented a group of investors who were looking to acquire and scale successful digital marketing agencies across the South. "Your growth trajectory is remarkable," Diana explained during our initial video call. "Most agencies take 5 to 7 years to reach your current revenue levels. You've done it in less than 3. We think Streamline Digital could be the foundation for a multi-state operation." The acquisition offer was more money than I had ever imagined possible. Diana's investment group was prepared to purchase a majority stake in Streamline Digital for $2.8 million with performance bonuses that could push the total value above $4 million within 2 years. Hannah and I spent weeks evaluating the offer, consulting with lawyers, and considering the implications. Accepting would mean instant financial independence and the resources to build something even larger, but it would also mean the end of any possibility of hiding our success from our families. "You realize," Hannah said one evening as we reviewed the acquisition documents, "that if we do this, there's no going back to pretending we're broke college students. This is real-world, adult-level business success that's going to be impossible to explain away." I had been thinking about the same issue. The acquisition would require press releases, industry announcements, and public recognition that would make maintaining the deception impossible. My parents would eventually learn that their unrealistic daughter had built and sold a multi-million-dollar business while they worried about her ability to find steady employment. The decision became easier when I calculated what the acquisition would mean for our employees and clients. Hannah and I had built something that provided good jobs for 12 people and measurable business improvements for over 100 clients. We had created real value in the world, not just financial returns for ourselves. We accepted Diana's offer in December of my junior year. The acquisition closed in February, with Streamline Digital becoming the flagship operation of what would eventually become a regional network of marketing agencies. Hannah and I retained operational control while gaining access to capital and resources that allowed us to expand into new markets. The press announcement appeared in Nashville Business Journal, Austin Business Review, and several industry publications. "Local marketing agency acquired in multi-million-dollar deal," read the headline, accompanied by photos of Hannah and me in our downtown office. I tried to prepare for the inevitable moment when someone from Milwaukee would see the coverage and connect it to their hometown girl who was supposedly struggling through college. That moment came sooner than expected in the form of a Facebook message from Jessica Miller, a high school classmate who'd moved to Nashville for nursing school. "Nat, I couldn't believe it when I saw your picture in the Business Journal. I had no idea you were running such a huge company here. This is incredible. When can we catch up?" Jessica's message included a screenshot of the article, which she had shared on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of my high school classmate who's conquering Nashville." Within hours, the post had been seen by dozens of people from Milwaukee, including several who knew my family. My phone started ringing that evening. First Marcus, then several family friends, and finally my parents, all wanting to understand how the daughter they thought was scraping by on part-time income had apparently built and sold a multi-million-dollar business without mentioning it to anyone. "Nat," Dad's voice was carefully controlled when I finally answered his call. "Your mother and I just received some very confusing information. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop called to congratulate us on your business success. She said she saw something on Facebook about you selling a company for millions of dollars. Obviously, there's been some kind of misunderstanding." The moment I had been dreading for years had finally arrived. There was no way to explain away the press coverage, no story that would reconcile their perception of my financial struggles with the reality of what I had built. The deception was over, and the conversation that would change everything was about to begin. "Dad," I took a deep breath, "there hasn't been any misunderstanding." Hannah and I built a digital marketing company called Streamline Digital, and we just sold it for $3.2 million. I've been running this business since we were in community college. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. When Dad finally spoke, his voice carried a combination of confusion, hurt, and something that might have been awe. "You've been running a $1 million business for 3 years and never told us?" The conversation that followed would last for hours and fundamentally reshape every relationship in my family. But in that moment, sitting in my Nashville office, with the city lights twinkling outside my window, all I felt was relief that the pretense was finally over.
The 3-hour phone conversation with my parents that February night was unlike any we'd ever had. It began with Dad's shocked question about the multi-million-dollar business sale and evolved into a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, pride, and disbelief that would take months to fully process. "Let me understand this correctly," Mom said, her voice carefully controlled. "For the past 3 years, while we've been sending you care packages and worrying about whether you could afford groceries, you've been running a company that employs 12 people?" The pain in her voice was unmistakable. They weren't just processing the financial deception, they were grappling with the realization that their daughter had achieved extraordinary success while allowing them to worry unnecessarily about her basic survival. I tried to explain the reasoning behind my secrecy, the years of dismissal that had led me to build my success in private rather than risk their disapproval. But from their perspective, the explanation sounded like justification for a betrayal of trust that cut to the core of our family relationship. "We would have been proud of you," Dad said quietly, and those words broke something inside me that I hadn't realized was still intact. "Maybe we didn't understand your computer interests when you were younger, but if we'd known you were building something real, something successful..." The conversation ended with tentative plans for them to visit Nashville and see Streamline Digital's offices in person. But the underlying tension was unmistakable. I had achieved everything they'd claimed to want for me: financial security, professional success, independence, while systematically excluding them from sharing in that achievement. The weeks following that revelation were emotionally complicated. My parents told Marcus about my business success, and his reaction was characteristically straightforward. "I always knew you were making more money than you let on. Nobody lives in Nashville and goes to college without financial stress unless something else is happening." Marcus had finished his accounting degree the previous year and was working for a small firm in Milwaukee, earning $38,000 annually in his first professional position. Learning that his older sister had just sold a business for more than he might earn in a lifetime created its own set of complex emotions within our family dynamic. "I'm proud of you," he told me during a private phone call, "but I'm also kind of angry that you let Mom and Dad worry about you for years when you could have just told them the truth." His perspective highlighted a crucial aspect of the situation I'd been avoiding. My secrecy hadn't just been about protecting myself from dismissal. It had also been about maintaining a certain dynamic where I remained the family member who needed guidance and support rather than the one capable of providing it. Meanwhile, Hannah was dealing with her own family revelations. Her parents, both teachers from Memphis, had reacted with unqualified pride and excitement about her business success. The contrast between her family's celebration and my family's complex mixture of emotions made me realize how much my childhood experiences with dismissal had shaped my approach to sharing achievements. "Your parents are processing a lot," Hannah observed one evening as we worked late in our expanded offices. "It's not just about the money or the business. You've fundamentally changed who you are in their eyes, and that takes time to adjust to." She was right, but the adjustment period was proving more difficult than I had anticipated. My parents' visits to Nashville were scheduled for spring break, which gave us all several weeks to process the new reality before facing each other in person. During those weeks, I found myself reflecting on how the deception had affected not just my relationship with my parents, but my own relationship with success. Building Streamline Digital in secrecy had been liberating in some ways. I'd been free to take risks, make unconventional decisions, and define success on my own terms without external judgment. But it had also been isolating in ways I was only beginning to understand. The loneliness of not being able to share victories with the people who had raised me had created a hollow quality to even our biggest achievements. When we'd landed our first six-figure client, when we'd moved to our downtown offices, when Diana Park had made her acquisition offer, all of these milestones had been celebrated with Hannah and our employees, but never with the family whose approval I'd spent my childhood seeking. Now, with the secret revealed, I was discovering that success shared after the fact felt different from success celebrated in real time. My parents were proud, but they were also processing feelings of exclusion from what should have been a family celebration years in the making.
The situation became more complex when news of the Streamline Digital acquisition spread throughout Milwaukee's small business community. Several of my former clients, including Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop and Mr. Chen from the restaurant, reached out to congratulate my parents on my success. These conversations revealed that I'd been helping local Milwaukee businesses remotely even after moving to Nashville, maintaining professional relationships my parents had known nothing about. Mrs. Chen told me you've been managing their online marketing for 2 years, Mom said during one of our weekly calls. She said their revenue increased by 40% since you started working with them. Why didn't you ever mention you were still helping businesses back home? The question highlighted how thoroughly I'd compartmentalized different aspects of my life. I'd maintained professional relationships in Milwaukee while creating personal distance from my family, serving their community while hiding my success from the people who lived there. These revelations were creating ripple effects throughout my extended family and childhood community. Relatives who'd heard my parents express concern about my unrealistic career choices were now learning that those concerns had been based on incomplete information. Family friends who'd offered advice about finding stable employment were discovering that I'd already built financial security beyond what most traditional careers could provide. The most challenging conversations came from well-meaning relatives who wanted to understand why I'd kept my success secret. During a particularly difficult call with my Aunt Linda, she asked the question everyone was thinking: did you not trust your parents enough to tell them the truth? The question forced me to confront the real issue underlying the deception. It wasn't that I hadn't trusted my parents, it was that I hadn't trusted their ability to see beyond their preconceptions about what constituted realistic career success. Years of having my interests dismissed as impractical had created a defensive wall that I'd maintained even after proving those dismissals wrong. But maintaining that wall had cost all of us something important. My parents had missed the opportunity to support and celebrate my achievements in real time. I had missed the chance to share the excitement of building something extraordinary with the people whose opinions mattered most to me. And our entire family had missed years of authentic relationship while navigating around a truth that should have brought us closer together. As I prepared for my parents' visit to Nashville, I realized that revealing the financial success was actually the easy part of this process. The harder work would be rebuilding trust, establishing new patterns of communication, and learning how to be authentically successful within a family relationship that had been built around very different assumptions. The upcoming visit would be the first time in years that I could show them exactly who I'd become rather than carefully managing their perceptions of my life. But I was also discovering that sudden authenticity after years of strategic deception created its own challenges that would require patience, understanding, and forgiveness from everyone involved. What I didn't yet know was that my parents were dealing with their own professional challenges that would soon make our family's reckoning about success, stability, and support even more complicated and emotionally charged. The call came on a Thursday evening in late March, 3 weeks before my parents' planned visit to Nashville. Marcus's voice carried a weight I'd never heard before, and his first words immediately told me something was seriously wrong. "Nat, we need to talk. It's about Mom and Dad." I was in my downtown Nashville condo reviewing quarterly reports for our post-acquisition integration when my phone rang. The view from my floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city's evening lights beginning to twinkle, but Marcus's tone made me forget about everything except the conversation. "What's wrong?" I asked, closing my laptop and giving him my full attention. "Dad got laid off yesterday. The plant is shutting down their entire manufacturing division and moving production overseas. After 28 years, they gave him a severance package that amounts to about 6 months of salary in a handshake." The news hit like a physical blow. Dad had worked at Midwest Automotive Parts since before I was born. His job had been the foundation of our family's stability, the steady paycheck that had allowed Mom to work part-time and both of them to worry about our college expenses instead of their mortgage payments. "What about Mom?" I asked, though Marcus's tone suggested there was more bad news coming. "That's the other thing. The clinic where she works is being acquired by a larger healthcare system. They're eliminating all the administrative positions that aren't directly patient-facing. Mom's job ends in 6 weeks." I sat down heavily on my couch, processing the implications. Both of my parents, at 55 years old, were suddenly facing unemployment in an economy that wasn't particularly kind to workers their age. Their combined severance and savings might sustain them for 4 or 5 months, but after that, they'd be in serious financial trouble. "How are they handling it?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Dad's trying to act like it's no big deal, like he'll find something else quickly. But Nat, he's been at that plant for almost 3 decades. His skills are pretty specific to that kind of manufacturing, and most of the similar jobs in the area have already been moved overseas or automated." "And Mom?" "She's scared. She tried to hide it when she told me, but I could see it. They've never been in a situation like this. They've always had steady work, predictable income. Now they're both starting over in their mid-50s with a mortgage and limited savings." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here were my parents, who had spent years preaching the importance of stable employment and practical career choices, suddenly facing a harsh reality that even the most traditional jobs weren't guaranteed. Meanwhile, their impractical daughter had built a business that could easily support all of us. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you think they would accept help from me? Real help, not just a loan to tide them over." "What kind of help are you talking about?" I had been thinking about this possibility ever since learning about the acquisition offer months earlier. Streamline Digital was expanding rapidly under its new ownership structure, and we needed experienced, trustworthy people in key administrative roles. My parents had exactly the kind of steady, reliable work ethic that would be valuable in a growing company. "I'm talking about offering them jobs at Streamline Digital. Real positions with good salaries and benefits. Not charity." Marcus was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Nat, are you serious? You'd hire Mom and Dad?" "Think about it, Marcus. Dad has 28 years of experience managing production schedules, coordinating between departments, and handling logistics. That's exactly the kind of operational expertise we need as we expand into new markets. Mom has 15 years of administrative experience, customer service skills, and the attention to detail that would be perfect for client account management." "But they don't know anything about digital marketing or technology." "They don't need to. We can teach them the industry-specific stuff, but we can't teach someone to have their work ethic, their reliability, or their people skills. Besides, some of our best employees came from completely different industries before joining us." The more I thought about it, the more the idea made sense from both a business and personal perspective. Streamline Digital was growing so rapidly that we were constantly hiring new people, and finding employees who shared our values and work ethic was always a challenge. My parents had exactly the qualities we look for, even if their previous experience wasn't in digital marketing.
You realize, Marcus said slowly, that this would completely flip the dynamic in our family.
Mom and Dad would be working for you. Their youngest daughter would be their boss. The observation was accurate and somewhat daunting. Our family had been built around traditional hierarchies where parents provided guidance and support to children who were still finding their way in the world. Offering my parents employment would acknowledge that those roles had already shifted more than any of us had fully recognized. Maybe it's time for that dynamic to change, I said. Maybe it's been changing for years and we've all been pretending it hasn't. Marcus agreed to help me approach our parents with the idea, but he warned me to prepare for a complicated reaction. Dad's pride is going to be an issue, he said. He spent his whole life being the provider, the one who took care of everyone else. Having to accept help from his daughter might be harder for him than being unemployed. What about Mom? Mom's more practical. If the jobs are real and the money is good, she'll probably see it as a blessing. But she'll also be worried about mixing family and business relationships. We agreed that I would make the offer during a video call the following Sunday, giving them time to process the idea before their visit to Nashville the next week. Marcus would be on the call to provide moral support and help explain the business rationale behind the offer. That weekend, I worked with Hannah and our HR director to develop formal job descriptions and compensation packages for both positions. We structured Dad's role as operations coordinator, responsible for managing project timelines, coordinating between departments, and ensuring efficient workflow across our multiple client accounts. Mom's position would be client relations specialist, handling account communications, client onboarding, and customer service issues. The salary packages we developed were significantly higher than their previous earnings. Dad would make $65,000 annually, Mom $55,000, both with comprehensive benefits and retirement contributions. For our company, these were competitive but not excessive compensation levels. For my parents, they represented financial security beyond anything they'd achieved in their previous careers. Sunday morning, I sat in my Nashville office with Hannah beside me for moral support, waiting for the video call that would either solve my parents' employment crisis or create new complications in our already complex family dynamic. My laptop screen showed the familiar backdrop of their Milwaukee kitchen, where family conversations had been taking place for as long as I could remember. When their faces appeared on screen, I could see the stress they'd been carrying. Dad looked older than he had just a month earlier, and Mom's usual smile seemed forced. Marcus joined from his apartment across town, creating a four-way conversation that felt loaded with significance before anyone spoke. I asked Marcus to join us today because I have something important to discuss with both of you. I know you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty right now, and I think I might have a solution that could help everyone. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the positions we'd developed, the responsibilities they would involve, and the compensation packages we were offering. I tried to frame the offer as a business decision rather than family assistance, emphasizing their qualifications and the genuine value they would bring to our company. When I finished, the silence that followed felt endless. My parents exchanged the kind of look that comes from 30 years of marriage, communicating volumes without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Natalie, are you offering us charity or are you offering us jobs? The directness of the question caught me off guard, but I realized it was exactly the right question to ask. I'm offering you jobs, Dad. Real positions in a growing company where your skills and experience would be valuable. If I thought you couldn't do the work or wouldn't be worth the salary, I wouldn't make the offer. Mom leaned forward toward the camera. And you really think we could learn this digital marketing business? We don't know anything about websites or social media or any of that. You don't need to know any of that, Hannah interjected, speaking for the first time during the call. Natalie's right about what you'd be doing. These are business operations positions that require exactly the kinds of skills you've been using for decades. We'll train you on the industry-specific stuff, but the core competencies are things you already have. The conversation continued for another hour, with my parents asking detailed questions about responsibilities, expectations, and logistics. By the end of the call, they hadn't given definitive answers, but they'd agreed to seriously consider the offer during their visit to Nashville the next week. After they hung up, I sat back in my chair, emotionally drained but cautiously optimistic. The offer was on the table. Whether they would accept it remained to be seen, but for the first time in our family's history,
I was in a position to provide the kind of security and stability they had always tried to give me. The role reversal was complete, even if none of us were quite ready to acknowledge it yet.
My parents arrived in Nashville on a Tuesday morning in early April, driving down from Milwaukee in Dad's 15-year-old Honda Civic with 2 suitcases and visible apprehension about what they were going to discover. I met them at their hotel downtown, and the contrast between their modest accommodations and my condo just blocks away highlighted the economic shift that had occurred between us over the past few years. "The city's bigger than I expected," Mom said as we walked towards Streamline Digital's offices. She was trying to make conversation, but I could see her taking in the gleaming buildings, the bustling business district, and the obvious prosperity that surrounded us. Dad walked quietly beside us, his expression mixing curiosity with something that might have been intimidation. He'd spent his entire career in Milwaukee's industrial areas, where success was measured in steady paychecks and reliable overtime, rather than startup acquisitions and downtown office towers. The elevator ride to Streamline Digital's 15th floor offices felt loaded with significance. When the doors opened to reveal our modern workspace, exposed brick walls, collaborative work areas, multiple conference rooms with glass walls, and 40-plus employees working on high-end computers, my parents stopped in the doorway as if they'd entered a different world. "This is where you work?" Mom asked quietly, her voice carrying a note of awe I'd never heard before. "This is what we built," I corrected gently. "Hannah and I, with our team." Hannah appeared to greet them, immediately putting them at ease with her warm personality and genuine enthusiasm for showing them around. As we toured the offices, she explained different departments, introduced key employees, and described the services we provided to clients across multiple states. "So, when you say you manage digital marketing campaigns," Dad asked, pausing in front of a wall display showing client success stories, "what exactly does that mean?" I spent the next 20 minutes explaining how we helped businesses reach customers online, improve their sales processes, and grow their revenue through strategic internet presence. I showed them specific examples of companies we'd helped, including several they recognized from commercials and local advertising. "Mrs. Patterson's flower shop," Mom said suddenly, reading one of our case studies. "You're still working with her?" "We've been managing her online presence for 2 years. Her revenue has increased by 60% since we started. And she's expanded to include wedding planning services because of the new customers we've helped her reach." The realization that I'd been successfully serving their home community while building a multi-million-dollar business seemed to shift something in both their expressions. This wasn't just about abstract success in a distant city. It was about using my skills to help people they knew and businesses they frequented. Our tour concluded in the conference room where Hannah and I had prepared detailed presentations about the positions we were offering. I'd structured the meeting like a professional job interview, complete with formal descriptions, organizational charts, and clear expectations for both roles. "Let me be direct about something," I said as we settled around the conference table. "These aren't charity positions created to help you through a difficult time. We genuinely need people in these roles, and your experience make you ideal candidates. If you weren't my parents, I'd still want to hire you based on your qualifications." Dad leaned forward, his expression serious. "And if you weren't our parents, would you pay us the same salaries you're offering?" "Actually," Hannah interjected, "we'd probably pay you more. We're offering slightly below market rate for these positions because we know there's a learning curve with the industry-specific knowledge. Once you're fully trained, the compensation would increase significantly." The honesty seemed to reassure Dad, who had been visibly struggling with the idea of accepting what he perceived as family assistance. Understanding that we were making legitimate business decisions rather than charitable gestures appeared to make the conversation easier for him. Mom asked detailed questions about the client relations role, clearly interested in the customer service aspects and the opportunity to help businesses solve problems. Her experience handling patient concerns and administrative issues at the clinic had given her exactly the skills needed for managing client accounts and resolving service issues. The hardest part of this job isn't learning our systems. It's understanding each client's business well enough to anticipate their needs and communicate effectively with their teams.
You've been doing that kind of work for 15 years.
Dad's questions focused on the operational logistics, how we managed project timelines, coordinated between departments, and ensured quality control across multiple client accounts simultaneously. As I described our workflow systems and management processes, I could see him mentally organizing the information and identifying areas where his manufacturing experience would be directly applicable. In manufacturing, we call this production flow management, he said, studying our project management charts. Different industry, but the principles are the same. You're coordinating inputs, managing timelines, and maintaining quality standards across multiple concurrent processes. Exactly, I said, feeling a moment of connection that had been rare throughout my childhood. Your experience with production scheduling and department coordination is exactly what we need as we scale up operations. The formal interview portion lasted 2 hours, but the real breakthrough came during lunch when both my parents began asking questions about company culture, growth plans, and long-term opportunities, rather than focusing on whether they were qualified for the positions. So, if we did this, Mom said carefully, if we moved to Nashville and started working for you, how would that work with family dynamics? I mean, you'd be our boss. It was the question we'd all been avoiding, but it needed to be addressed directly. The traditional parent-child relationship we'd maintained throughout my life would have to evolve into something more complex and egalitarian. That's something we'd all need to figure out together, I admitted. At work, I'd be your supervisor, and you'd need to be comfortable taking direction from me about business decisions. At family gatherings, I'd still be your daughter who probably needs advice about personal relationships and life decisions. Dad nodded slowly. It would take some getting used to, but it's not that different from any situation where family members work together. Your Uncle Mike worked for your grandfather's construction company for 20 years, and they managed to keep business and family separate. Hannah added her perspective. The key is establishing clear boundaries and communication expectations up front. We've had family members of employees work here before, and it's always successful when everyone understands the professional expectations. By the end of their 3-day visit, both my parents had essentially accepted the positions, though they wanted a few weeks to handle logistics in Milwaukee before making the move official. They needed to put their house on the market, coordinate their severance packages, and prepare for a relocation that would represent the biggest change in their adult lives. The morning they left Nashville, Dad pulled me aside for a private conversation in the hotel lobby. Natalie, I need to say something that I should have said years ago. Your mother and I were wrong to dismiss your interests in technology and business. We thought we were protecting you from disappointment, but we were really just protecting ourselves from having to acknowledge that the world was changing faster than we understood. The apology was more than I'd expected and more meaningful than I'd imagined it would be. Dad, you were trying to give me realistic advice based on your experience. I understand that now. But our experience was limited. We couldn't see what you were seeing because we were looking at the world through the lens of our own generation. You saw opportunities we couldn't recognize, and instead of trusting your judgment, we tried to redirect you toward what felt safer to us. 3 weeks later, my parents moved to Nashville and began their new careers as employees of the company their unrealistic daughter had built. The adjustment period was exactly as complex as we had anticipated, but it was also surprisingly natural. At work, they brought professionalism, reliability, and decades of business experience to their roles. At family dinners, we gradually learned how to navigate the shifted dynamics while maintaining the relationships that had always mattered most. The most surreal moment came 6 months after they started working for Streamline Digital, when Dad approached me with suggestions for improving our operational efficiency based on lean manufacturing principles he'd learned during his automotive career. His recommendations ultimately saved the company over $200,000 annually and improved client satisfaction scores across all departments. You know, he said after presenting his efficiency analysis, we should have been listening to each other's expertise all along instead of assuming we knew better. The role reversal was complete.
but it had evolved into something more collaborative and mutually respectful than any of us had anticipated.
2 years have passed since my parents moved to Nashville and joined Streamline Digital as employees. As I sit in my office today preparing to share this story, I can see Dad through the glass walls of our conference room, leading a training session for new employees about operational efficiency. Mom is at her desk nearby, handling a client escalation with the patience and professionalism that has made her one of our most valued team members. The transformation has been remarkable for everyone involved. Dad discovered that his manufacturing expertise translated perfectly to managing digital marketing operations, and his suggestions for improving our workflow processes have become company-wide best practices. Mom found that her natural ability to understand people's concerns and communicate solutions made her exceptional at client relations, and she's been promoted twice since starting with us. More importantly, the professional relationship forced all of us to see each other as competent adults, rather than maintaining the parent-child dynamics that had defined our family for decades. When Dad presents efficiency recommendations in team meetings, I evaluate them as his supervisor based on their business merit, not as his daughter trying to please him. When Mom successfully resolves a difficult client situation, I recognize her professional skills rather than just appreciating her nurturing nature. The financial impact has been transformative for their lives. They've purchased a beautiful home in Nashville's suburbs, something they never could have afforded on their Milwaukee salaries. Dad drives a new truck, his first new vehicle in 15 years. Mom has returned to painting in her spare time, converting their basement into the art studio she'd given up decades ago to support Dad's career. But the changes go deeper than material improvements. Dad recently told me that working at Streamline Digital has been the most intellectually stimulating period of his career. I spent 30 years following other people's processes, he said. Here, you actually want me to think about how to make things better. Mom has flourished in ways that surprised all of us. The confidence she gained from successfully managing challenging client relationships has carried over into other areas of her life. She's taken leadership roles in community organizations, started teaching art classes at the local community center, and developed a social circle of friends who appreciate her insights rather than just her support for someone else's ambitions. Marcus visits Nashville regularly now, and watching our family dinners has become a source of entertainment for Hannah and other close friends. The dynamics are completely different from our childhood. Instead of Dad holding court while the rest of us listened, our conversations have become collaborative discussions where everyone's expertise and opinions are valued equally. It's weird, Marcus observed during his last visit, but you guys actually seem to like each other now. When we were kids, it always felt like everyone was trying to prove something or avoid disappointing someone. He's right. The professional relationship forced us to strip away the assumptions and expectations that had constrained our family interactions for years. When you have to work together successfully, you quickly learn to focus on each person's actual strengths rather than your preconceptions about what they should be good at. The business impact has been positive too. Having employees who share your values and work ethic is invaluable in a rapidly growing company. Dad's operational improvements have saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Mom's client retention rate is the highest on our team. They've become assets to the company beyond just being my parents. But perhaps the most significant change has been in how we communicate about challenges and opportunities. Instead of Dad lecturing me about practical choices while I privately pursued my own path, we now collaborate on solving problems and planning for the future. When I'm considering major business decisions, I genuinely value their input because I've seen their professional competence in action. The story illustrates several important lessons that extend far beyond our family-specific situation. First, success rarely follows the traditional timelines or pathways that previous generations expect. The economy my parents entered in the 1980s, where stable employment predictably led to retirement security, no longer exists. Their layoffs after decades of loyal service prove that even the most practical career choices carry risks. Second, dismissing someone's interests or abilities based on conventional wisdom can blind you to extraordinary potential.
My parents weren't wrong to value stability and security, but they were wrong to assume that entrepreneurship and technology couldn't provide those things. Their inability to see beyond traditional career paths almost prevented them from recognizing and supporting remarkable success.
Third, family relationships can evolve and improve dramatically when they're based on mutual respect rather than rigid hierarchies. Our professional relationship forced all of us to see each other as competent adults with valuable skills and insights. That recognition has made our personal relationships more authentic and satisfying. Finally, the story demonstrates that helping family members shouldn't be about charity or obligation. It should be about recognizing and utilizing everyone's strengths for mutual benefit. Hiring my parents wasn't an act of generosity, it was a business decision that benefited everyone involved. The experience has also taught me about the importance of sharing success rather than hoarding it. The years I spent hiding my achievements were emotionally costly for everyone. My parents missed opportunities to celebrate and support my growth. I missed the satisfaction of sharing victories with people who loved me. Our entire family missed years of authentic relationship while navigating around truths that should have brought us closer together. Today, Streamline Digital employs 68 people across 3 states and generates annual revenue exceeding $8 million. We've been recognized as one of the fastest-growing marketing agencies in the Southeast, and we're planning expansion into 2 additional markets next year. But the professional success feels more meaningful because it's built on authentic relationships rather than secrecy and deception. My parents are genuinely proud of what we've built together, and I'm genuinely grateful for the stability and expertise they bring to our operations. The role reversal that began with offering them jobs has evolved into something more like a partnership, where everyone contributes their unique strengths toward common goals. Dad's operational expertise helps us serve clients more efficiently. Mom's relationship skills help us retain clients and resolve conflicts. My strategic vision and Hannah's creative leadership provide direction and innovation. Last month, Dad suggested that we consider acquiring a small manufacturing company that could handle promotional materials for our marketing clients. It was exactly the kind of unconventional business thinking that he'd once dismissed when it came from me, but now he was proposing it based on his own industry expertise and understanding of our client needs. Sometimes, he said after presenting his acquisition proposal, the best business opportunities come from combining different types of experience in unexpected ways. The suggestion reminded me of something I'd learned years earlier. Success often comes from seeing connections and possibilities that others miss because they're constrained by conventional thinking. The difference now is that our family recognizes and encourages that kind of innovative thinking rather than redirecting it towards safer, more traditional approaches. As I finish sharing this story, I want to leave you with a question that might be relevant to your own life and relationships. Have you ever felt underestimated or dismissed by people whose opinions matter to you? How did you respond to that challenge? Maybe you've allowed their limitations to constrain your own ambitions. Maybe you've achieved success while hiding it to avoid conflict. Or maybe you're still in the middle of proving them wrong and haven't yet figured out how to bridge the gap between their perceptions and your reality. Whatever your situation, remember that other people's inability to see your potential doesn't diminish that potential. Their preconceptions about what's realistic or practical are based on their own experiences and limitations, not yours. And sometimes the best way to change their minds isn't through arguments or explanations, it's through results that are impossible to ignore. The journey from dismissed daughter to successful CEO who hired her own parents taught me that family relationships can transform in remarkable ways when they're built on mutual respect, authentic communication, and recognition of everyone's unique strengths. Your path might be different, but the destination, authentic success shared with people you love, is worth whatever challenges you face along the way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.